So chapter 5, this week's chapter, deals with gender and gender identity. So I wanted to give you a 5 to 10 minute little overview of this chapter so that we are starting our exploration of these concepts on the same page. So first of all, we need to make the distinction of definitions between sex and gender. So sex refers to biology, whether we are male, biologically female, or intersex. So intersex condition refers to the idea that that an individual does not have a well-defined set of genitals. In other words, they may have both male and female, or the predominant one may be ambiguous. So it used to be that when a baby was delivered in the delivery room, that the doctor often, without even conferring with the parents, would make the judgment, okay, let's see, I think that it'll be easier to make this kid a female genitally than it would be a male, so they'd do that without conferring with the parents. Then we moved into a situation in which the doctors were more willing to enlist the assistance in the decision of the parents, and so there became a conversation between the parents and the doctor. Now, more and more, as I'm reading research in this area, I see that both doctors and parents are becoming a little more aware of the intersex condition, and so a lot of times when parents hear that this is going on, it's like, well, no, we don't want to make the decision of whether our kid is going to be male or female. Why don't we just wait and see how things evolve during that child's upbringing? And so to my mind, I think this is probably the most psychologically healthy approach to it. So gender refers not to the idea of what sex we are, but biologically, but rather to how we perceive ourselves between our ears as opposed to between our legs, to paraphrase a quote from Chaz Bono. So basically, gender has to do with the psychological, the cultural, and the social components that we think of as belonging to men, women, and other gender groups. So we kind of get the concepts broadened when we move into there. Next, I would like to clarify the difference between gender identity, gender roles, and gender stereotypes. So gender identity has to do with, how do I perceive myself? Do I perceive myself as male? Do I perceive myself as female or something else, right? So this actually has a biological undergirding, because the hormones that are being discharged in the developing fetus in the mother's body, those hormones sometimes influence our sense of maleness or femaleness, if you would. So then we move from gender identity to gender roles. So gender roles refers to the idea, all right, well, I know what my family, what my friends, what my culture, what my community expects of me to behave, because they have been relating to me as a male, or they've been relating to me as a female. So I need to make sure that when I thrust my public face into the community, that I'm behaving in a way that complies with their impression of me. Then gender stereotype, you have probably felt this more on the playground, particularly in elementary school, because we have what we call the playground code. And so basically, if you are perceived as a male by your teachers and or peers in elementary school, and you're on the playground and you're displaying a behavior that may be the antithesis of their perception of you. In other words, you're a male, but you're behaving in a way that's considered to be stereotypically female, then you may get made fun of. So that's reining you in, reining your behavior in. So we know about what some of those stereotypes are. Boys don't cry, right? Girls should defer to the masculine opinion. Back in the 20th century, in the middle of the century and before that, women's place was in the home, and specifically in the kitchen. A lot of times women didn't want to go into careers, or didn't go, I shouldn't say they didn't want to, they didn't go into careers because of the fact that if they were heterosexual and married to a heterosexual guy, the husband is like, no, I don't want you to go to work because that will impact the community's perception of who I am. It will somehow diminish my masculinity in the eyes of my friends and so forth. Okay, so I think I've already mentioned about the hormones playing a role in terms of masculinizing or feminizing the brain before birth. The hormones, as we pursue in the next chapter, contributes to our sexual orientation development too. By the way, 2% individuals are intersexed in society, and while a lot those of us who have not really considered or haven't known that much about intersexed individuals, while it seems a little strange, a little alien to our thinking about this whole concept, the thing is that intersexed individuals, they don't feel as though there's anything ambiguous about what's between their legs. This is natural to them. And so more and more we have intersex individuals who make the decision not to do any kind of cosmetic surgery. Also, we are really prone, because our brain, as you know, craves patterns and structure. We like to catalog people into certain categories. If we see someone, a woman, for example, who looks masculinized to a degree, then a lot of times where do our brains go? Oh, she must be a lesbian. Or if we see a man who has like maybe enlarged hips, then we think, and so it looks, he walks a little bit more like we perceive a woman to stereotypically walk. Then we might jump to the conclusion, oh, well, he must be gay. But the thing we've got to keep in mind is that there are a number of syndromes. I think Dr. Lynn Miller lists 4 or 5 in your textbook that feminize and masculinize our physical characteristics. So we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions based on that. Those of you who are going into medical related careers, this is probably a part of the chapter you want to pay particularly close attention to, because it may be relevant to you. Okay, then let's take a look at the differences between transgender, transsexual, and cisgender individuals. So if you're cisgender, okay, you've got everything matched up perfectly. What's between your legs matches up with what's between your ears. You identify you are male between your legs, then you perceive yourself as male. So that's kind of the binary way that our society tends to work, and we've only more or less recently become aware of variations on that theme. Transgender individuals don't perceive themselves in quite that cut and dried binary way. So they may have a little more fluidity to the way they see themselves. Transgender individuals don't often have a perception to change their genders, but they might say, okay, I like this particular top, and even though that I sometimes dress as a male, even though this looks like a feminine top, I'm going to wear it. So transgender individuals might do what we call cross-dressing. We may see even some transgender individuals performing in drag shows and that sort of thing, but they are not as likely to want to move from their biological sex to another. Okay, and then transsexuals. We conflate transsexuals with transgender individuals a lot, though they're technically not exactly the same kind of person, right? A transsexual individual is someone who is like, okay, I know what I was born with biologically, but what I was born with does not match what's between my ears. In other words, I am biologically male, but I feel as though I am, by identity, a woman. And so these individuals often take pains ranging from dressing as the desired sex, or maybe just doing hormone therapy, or moving all the way to getting gender affirmation surgery, which used to be called sex reassignment surgery or sex change surgeries. So they may go, make that whole big transition, right? And I think those surgeries started back in the 1960s, and so they have become more and more sophisticated, more and more successful in doing what the patient would prefer them to do. Probably one of the biggest negatives as far as this surgery is concerned is it is often not covered by insurance companies, medical health insurance companies. So you have to fork over the money yourself, and that surgery often costs between $30,000 and $50,000. Okay, last two things as we wrap things up. You're going to see a little bit of attention paid to what we call third genders. So, when we're talking about gender fluid, gender queer, pangender, and all that sort of thing, right? This isn't something new on our planet, because we've had a number of cultures and societies where third genders existed. I mean, even our own original Americans, Native Americans in our country, various Indian tribes throughout the United States, when we take a look at their histories, we find out that they also had third gender individuals and they revered them. A lot of times these beardocs would be, or beardaches would be assigned like a high spiritual or wise kind of quality, so they were respected by members of the tribe. And then finally, Miller emphasizes the fact that despite the fact that we have books that try to emphasize the differences between men and women, there's not all that much difference. Okay, we find out, for example, when we take a look at psychological studies, that yes, males tend to be more aggressive perhaps. They may be more inclined to react physically when they're pissed off. But the thing about it, when we take a look at this, men tend to be provoked more often than women are. Women, on the other hand, tend to be more relational in terms of their aggression, right? And so basically, they may gossip or spread bad rumors about somebody who's being a real jerk about them. But the thing about it, when you think of these things, it's like maybe these men and women, these differences are being portrayed because they are complying with social expectations of who they are on the basis of their sex or gender. So basically, when we get down to serious research about differences, we find out that these sex differences primarily relate to social scripts and expectations. So enjoy the chapter, and we'll tune in again next week.